Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke, so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandee. I'm hoping people can hear me. Again, I'm still getting used to this whole live streaming thing, so I'm going to be checking the chat to make sure that my audio is on. And there's a delay, so it's always really weird when I do this. I guess I'll continue talking until I get confirmation one way or another, because people, when they see me talking, like lips moving, but they don't hear anything, I'm sure you would say something. Ah, okay, got the all clear. Okay, you can hear me. This is great. Great start. So, I am a person with autism, ADHD, and other neurodivergent traits, although I have not been diagnosed with any of them for various reasons. And I find that they offer their own unique challenges when trying to get involved with politics, being an activist, things of that sort. Part of the reason why is because I am a person with disabilities. And I struggle financially to get involved with things because a lot of things, whether it be activism or politics, requires that you have some sort of money. But the way the Canadian government is, it's so hard to just be at the poverty line, never let alone being above it. So I want to have a discussion about it with somebody else who's also Canadian, who also has an understanding of what it's like to be neurodivergent and political. This is going to be an open-ended conversation. There's just a couple things I'm thinking of touching on. It's, I like conversations to just kind of see where they go. So before I bring Marc Joycey, I think I said his name right, I'll find out soon enough, in, just a reminder that my cat Frodo, I'll do this fun little thing here, recently had to go to the vet for many reasons. Thankfully, the update is he seems to be doing fine. He's been eating. He's starting to interact with his new siblings. It's the greatest thing ever to see him starting to build a relationship with his siblings. I am still working on paying off his vet bills. I'm close. I'm just over $300 away from that. So if you can, please help me pay off his vet bills. You'll find a link to my PayPal account in the description box below. As well, if you're Canadian, you can send an e-transfer to sandeelovas@gmail.com. If neither of those are an option for you, but you would still like to help, I have an Amazon wish list also linked below with items that it used to be just items that I would need for my studio or my art, but I've started to add items that I just could use, certain types of groceries and stuff. Because, even if you purchase me coffee off my wish list, that's one less thing I have to spend out of pocket, and that's money that then can go towards the vet bill. So please, if you can help out, and only if you have the money to spare, I don't want people sacrificing things they need in order to help me out. So only if you have the money to spare, please help me out with that. So don't forget to share the stream, let people know this is happening. It's going to be a very fun conversation. I'm saying that now. That is my prediction, that it's going to be a really fun conversation. So I will bring in Marc now. Oops, that was the wrong button. I meant to hit that button. There, see? I'm still, this is live. Live. Okay, we are now live.
Hello.
So hopefully you can hear Marc. So Marc, please introduce yourself, and hopefully I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Hi there. So my name is Marc Joycey, and I have been a follower of Canadian politics probably since I was a child. It was one of my special interests as somebody who has autism. We all have some form of special interest that we're really deep dived into, and mine was politics. So I've been following politics since a very young age, and I ended up going to university to get a degree in political science. And I've also been acting. I got a diploma in acting from Vancouver, and I've been trying to get my start here in Nova Scotia for acting. And combining those two aspects, I find talking about politics and being engaged in politics is an incredibly important thing for me, especially as somebody on the spectrum and who has ADHD and sees a lot of issues regarding disability and neurodiversity and ableism and things that are really important, and how they're not talked about a lot, or they're talked about in a way that is very dismissive and borderline eugenical. So I think it's important to talk about. I think it's important for people to grasp the situation. But I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith. Otherwise, I wouldn't be following this so hard or pushing for it so hard, because it's easy to give up, and I don't like giving up. So here I am.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say welcome to the people in the chat. I'm sorry if I don't mention all of your names. I get distracted going back and forth because, it's just so many sensory things going on. But Edward has a question, who just came in and would like to be brought up to speed on the acronym ND, which stands for neurodivergent. So neurodivergent means a person can have things like ADHD, OCD, autism, dyslexia. I don't know, like basically things that lead you to not being neurotypical. And it's quite common for people to have more than one of these diagnoses, or it's like I don't even want to call it conditions. It's just, ways of thinking, the way your brain works is differently. Because sometimes, they don't interfere with my life. Like my OCD, it doesn't really interfere with my life too much. Sometimes it can actually help me organize things, but other times it does become problematic, and that's when I start referring to the D part of the disorder. So most of my life, I've known that I've been different. Like when I was really young, my mom understood that I was dyslexic, and she had my elementary school test me, and for intelligence, I turned out to be above average. But because I kept on reversing letters and numbers, and I couldn't spell at all because of it, they put me in special ed, which even at that young age, I understood that didn't feel right. I felt like I was being talked down to a lot. And it was hard for me to explain. It's like, I know how to spell ball, but I understand that often I'm writing it with a D instead of a B, and I don't know why that is, but I do know how to spell it. So I was running into a lot of those issues, and later on in life, I got diagnosed with bipolar, manic depressive, and have suffered from depression most of my life to varying extreme degrees. Something I still am learning to maintain and cope with. And it wasn't until I actually got onto Twitter and was exposed to a whole bunch of new people and hearing them talk, hearing them say their stories, that I started to understand that a lot of my life, what I have been dealing with was undiagnosed autism, ADHD, OCD. Like the ADHD and OCD I actually clued into a long time ago, but the autism was something that was new to me. But once I kind of understood what autism is, it kind of skyrocketed my understanding of who I am. Because up until that point, I knew a couple people who were autistic. I heard of it, but the way they were autistic was very different than the way that I'm autistic. And that's one of the things about being autistic is you can't just label autism and expect everyone who's autistic to behave the same way. It's very diverse within the spectrum of being autistic as to what people can and cannot do, or how they function, how they think and feel, and so on. I am also a person who is politically engaged. I tried to run for politics, and having disabilities while running for politics makes it a lot harder, to say the least. And we can get talking about some of those. Let's see. So where do we want to start with this? I have some stuff queued up. Do we want to start specifically with maybe explaining CERB and DERB and the CDB, Canada Disability Benefit?
Absolutely. Just before we do, I will highlight that you having the ability and the experience necessary to come to the conclusion that you're autistic or ADHD or OCD without a diagnosis. I'll say somebody who has been officially diagnosed, like through a bunch of clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, that self-diagnosis, a true reflection of trying to understand yourself, is just as valid, and I think should be fully respected, or at least heard out before any judgments or need to talk down or dismiss. It took forever for somebody to diagnose me with ADHD while being autistic. In fact, the DSM was not allowed to diagnose autistic and ADHD together in somebody until about 2013. Psychologists and clinical folks, they don't always know what they're doing, and they miss stuff. So, I'll say if somebody comes up to me and says that they're autistic and they say I found that out because of my own self advocacy and research and finding who I am, I'm 100% going to respect that. So I,
Yeah,
it's important to touch on that.
I guess this can actually lead into a bit of a conversation about the struggles of getting diagnosed in Canada, because there's this misconception that we have universal health care, which is not the case, especially when it comes towards anything mental health related. Different provinces will have different types of funding, but it's not guaranteed the same way physical care, health care is looked after by provincial and federal governments. So, for me to get diagnosed properly, I would need money. Because you have to see a specialist and they're not cheap. Or you can go on a wait list that's years long, one or the other. And
Yeah.
then you can run into the problem, like the same type of problem I ran into when my mom was trying to get me diagnosed with dyslexia, is that, well, you're doing good enough, so we're not doing anything about it. And all my life I've been masking so hard. And that's a new term to me. Masking is where you basically just pretend to not be yourself to fit into whatever environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And you swallow what you're dealing with, how you're feeling, to accommodate the comfort of the people around you. And I've been doing that so much for so long in my life, it's hard for me to actually tell who I am when I'm not masking. Because I don't, like, and here's the thing, like, people who are neurotypical also mask to some extent, depending on the environment that they're in. So it's not something exclusively for autistic people, but it's much more pronounced, where there were times I couldn't interact with people at all. And there are times when I'm struggling, so I just kind of take myself out of situations. So I'm not socially developed. Like, I have a hard time interacting in social groups with people because I don't know what the normal human response is to things. And the only reason why I had a job not too long ago, the only reason why I was able to hold it for so long was because my boss was my best friend, and we had very open and honest conversations about my mental health. And this was before I even knew I was autistic. And I would literally ask him, what is the human response to this thing that just happened at work? Because I didn't know, because it's like all I could think of, well, if I were to announce this, this is how I would be feeling. And that's not generally how other people would react to it. And the forced socialization at work, I despise. I can't handle it. It's like, oh, we're doing a group photo. Or if it's a choice, I have the option of participating or not, that's one thing. But there's a lot of forced socialization that goes on in the workplaces that I cannot handle. Like, any environment that I'm in where you're forced to socialize with people you don't choose to be around is something that's just, I don't know how to do it. And then I end up offending people because I say the wrong things to them. One of the things that autistic tend to be is incredibly honest when you're not supposed to be. So
Yeah, I've learned there was a lot of times where I had to learn when to speak and when not to speak, in terms of like saying how I truly felt about something. Because if you said how you truly felt, but it didn't match the expected response of everybody around you, instead of engaging with you on like what you said, it was very much of like, how dare you said that, or why would you say that, or you shouldn't speak your opinion. And you just learn very quickly, especially at a young age, that it's just like, all right, if you don't conform to what's everybody's standard, even if you have no idea why that's the standard or the rules, or like, well, the nuances of everything, you have to guess every time, and you have to do the right one every time, or else there's like ostracization, almost like a social repercussion, like you disturb the force or something and you have to be like excommunicated. It's just,
mm-hmm.
it's very frustrating because there's no there's no desire for anybody to want to be like, well, why did you come at it from this way? And how can I maybe think about things differently and try to view why you came about it this way? Or,
Yeah.
next time, what can you, like, how can we help you understand what we're doing, or prepare things easier? There's just no desire to want to do that
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
I've run into the problem where people have been mad at me for something I did or didn't do, but then they don't communicate that to me, and so I'm not addressing it at all, like their concerns with my behavior, and then they get mad at me for not doing that, but I have no idea what's going on until the point that they just blow
Exactly.
up at me. And I've
Exactly.
lost friends that way, where I'm just like, I thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden I say something to a friend and they blow up at me and they do like the friendship breakup and they never want to see me again. And I'm at a complete loss as to why this happened. And I have found in some situations when I've been talking to people who aren't necessarily that understanding, like they may be trying to understand, but they can't wrap their head around mental health issues in general, and saying things like, I need these in my work environment or else I can get stressed, and if I have stress, I can have a meltdown, or things like, if I were to be kicked off of Ontario disability right now, despite how low it is, it's still, you know, keeping me around by just a thread. If I were to be kicked off of that, it's only a matter of time before I end things. I don't want to get demonetized right off the bat, but, I unalive myself. And people have accused me of emotional blackmail because of these things. But I'm like, no, this is just what would happen. Like, this is just the logical consequence. It's the symptoms. It's how the symptoms play out for my depression. It's not something I want to do. It's not something that I'm planning. It's not something that I'm threatening. It's just, this is how it's going to be, because if I lose ODSP, there's no way I can hold down a job that could pay for rent. ODSP doesn't really pay for rent unless you're somebody like me who's been on a rental contract for over 10 years. And even then, most of my check, like 90% of my check, goes towards my rent. And so where do I go? What do I do if I lose ODSP and I can't afford to be anywhere? And I lose my apartment, and then the options are, well, then I can move in with somebody, but then I'm being forced to have to move in and interact and share a space with somebody that I might not want to. I might not be able to keep my cats, and without them, they're my anchors, they're my light. Without them, I don't know. There was only one time where I was forced to live without them, and that was when I was unhoused in Toronto, and that was just so devastating because one of them actually passed away while I was in there. And just trying to explain to people, like, if all I need in work is to be left alone, let me listen to my music so that I can drown out the other sounds around me. Don't bug me, if I'm in a particular type of mood, I'll let you know and try to address me in certain ways. But as soon as I start making those types of demands, they're like, I'm being unreasonable, or I'm trying to, hold them hostage with emotions or something of that sort. And it's been a problem, even with family members. It's, they just want you to, I've been told to just shut up and pretend that I'm happy to be wherever I'm at. I don't know if you have any similar experiences, Mark. Sorry.
Well, I definitely have.
Yeah. Thank you, Crystal, for the super chat, the $4.99. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Sandee, for your honesty about being autistic. You have helped me to understand my dad better. Much gratitude and love for you. Oh, thank you so much. It's very kind.
It's great.
Sorry, I'm going to be, I don't know how to look at the chats at the end. I don't know where they show up on the screen yet. So I don't know how to save them until the end to address them. So I'm trying to address them as they pop up. So I might have to cut you off before
fine.
I lose it type thing.
That's okay. No, I was going to say my experiences with working at different jobs. is that they are willing to accommodate you up until what they feel comfortable accommodating you, and not necessarily what meets your needs, um, which I find to be incredibly frustrating and like paternalistic. To be like, we know what's best, and we know how much we can give you, and what you really need, and what we're okay with giving you, and you should be happy that we're acknowledging you at all. And it really feels like they don't want to take the extra step needed to make other people's lives more accommodating, especially for mental health, because it almost seems like we're if we make life easier for us, it's almost like, well, that's not fair. Like, life isn't easy for me, so why should it be easy for them? That's the world. It's why should I go out of my way to make more vulnerable people feel more accommodated? And it I can understand and empathize that a lot of people are struggling, especially in this day and age, and some of those people don't have mental health issues, and I fully empathize with that. But I don't see how going out of their way to be like, okay, this employee needs extra time. This employee needs the ability to have some downtime if they become overly stimulated, or have some burnout, or have some shutdown, and that they can take that time and come back to the work that they're doing without any expectation that, oh, they're not meeting standards, oh, they're not performing up to what we need to perform. Um, I had a job that slowly stopped scheduling me. I went from like 4 or 5 days a week to like 3 days a week to like 2 days to 1 day to once every 2 weeks to once every 3 weeks until they stopped. And then 3 months later, I got a call, and the call was, "Would you like us to take you off payroll?" Because it was been 3 months and they hadn't scheduled me. And I go in and I asked, schedule, and they said, "Oh, not these 2 weeks." So it's they don't want to take the time to work with you. They would rather just let you quit, and
Yeah.
it really hurts because it was a minimum wage job. Like, it's not like I want to work minimum wage.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the work of minimum wage workers, but they deserve to be paid like absolutely reasonable rates. Like, I don't see any reason why minimum wage shouldn't be tied to living wage and then go up with inflation.
Yeah.
Like, if living wage for Halifax, for us example, is calculated at 26 and a half an hour, then bump it up to 26 and a half an hour, and then bump it up with inflation, and whatever consequence ends up coming from that, because I know there will be people that say X, Y, and Z of why you can't do that to the economy. Well, things are already happening to the economy now that are hurting people. And I don't understand why the pain of the status quo is somehow more acceptable than any new pain that attempting to fix it would cause. Like, pain is pain. We live with the pain now. We're just happy with who gets hurt. But you're not willing to take a chance that the pain might be felt by people who make 6 figures or 7 figures or high 5 figures a year. And it just, I don't know. It just, there's a disconnect for me. Because it just seems like a logical, easy step to make. You just got to be brave and do it. But people just find excuses to not want to. And, like, going back to looking at, being on disability, like, I was on income assistance until they determined I was making too much money. And what too much money was $1,200 a month. I don't know about you, but if you make $1,200 a month, rent in Halifax on average is about 2.3, 2.4 now. So they were comfortable with me only making 50% of the average rent before they decided, you don't really need our help anymore.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I don't know. It feels really bizarre.
Yeah.
That's all I can say about it.
Well, this actually brings in like three different points that I feel are important to talk about. So one of them is just part of the reason why it's hard for people to take us seriously when we're talking about mental health and disabilities is because it's an invisible disability. And there's invisible disabilities that can also be physical. Like at one time, I was massively overweight. And so standing on my feet for long periods of time, just, I couldn't do that. The pain in my feet would just be so excruciating. And then, a night wasn't long enough to recover fully from it. So then the following day, the pain would just be so much worse faster. And I was working in a factory at that time, and you would change from the different stations and stuff. And my simple request of please just let me go to stations where I can sit was worth them just firing me. And there's no way to really prove it one way or another because, oh, well, I wasn't, a good fit for them, or, oh, they're downsizing. Like, there's always excuses, and it's so hard to kind of prove that they did it because of this, that they're unwilling to accommodate you, even in the slightest. And part of it is because they know there's enough people out there desperate for just any job that we are easily replaceable. And it's just so frustrating that it's like that. Like, even people with the visible disabilities, like, you can see that they have the aids for like maybe hearing or visual or walking and stuff like that. If they go into a job interview and they don't get the job, there's no way for them to prove that it was because of their disability. The people might not be comfortable with them and just say, well, we found a more qualified candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm in a situation where it's like, well, people are like, well, you need to get a job. And the simple reality of this is nobody will hire me. That is just a flat out, nobody will hire me. It doesn't matter what the job is. The only reason why I got that job that I was actually able to maintain for a while was because I was referred by my friend who didn't know he was going to be my boss at the time. So he was really thrown through a loop when we were in the interview, and the department manager's like, so she'll be reporting to you. And it's like, what? But it was only because of that referral that I was able to get that job. And even the people who do the hiring there said that, yeah, if they had just seen my resume, they would have never picked me. Even though I excelled at my job. I was very good at Excel. I excelled at Excel. When I say I have advanced Excel skills, I'm actually one of those people that I mean it. I can do magical things within Excel. But now part of the problem is, since I haven't been using it regularly for so long, I've forgotten a lot of it. So it's going to take me 3 to 6 months to maybe get up to speed to where I was with those advanced skills. But in a job interview, like, how do I explain why I haven't had a job for the last while? How do I explain? It's like when they say, so are you good with interacting with other people? I can lie about it and say, sure, or I can be honest and say, I'd rather not. And so if I lie about it and end up getting the job, then the job is going to be short-lived because I won't be able to handle it. If I say, like, even saying something like when they ask about your communication style and I say, I'm very direct and to the point, they don't like that. Like, even something like that. And so it doesn't matter. Like, a job that would actually fit my qualifications will never hire me because I also don't have a college diploma. And so a lot of the online applications, I get filtered out before anyone even sees it. So what am I supposed to do? Like, I wouldn't even be able to get a job at Tim Hortons because nobody there would hire me because then I can fall into this trap of like, well, you're too qualified, you're overqualified, or this isn't your qualification. And it's just, what am I supposed to do? Like, is the government, they demand that we get jobs, but they aren't demanding employers hire us. Like, right. Employers where it's actually, suitable to our skill sets. And so then we get into a lot of the stigma. It's like, oh, well, you don't want to work and stuff. And it's like, I just work differently. I can do different things. A lot of those things don't necessarily pay, like trying my best to do YouTube videos and whatnot. But every time there's that talk about like maybe we should raise the rates for people who live with disabilities to the poverty line, people get so upset, or they get upset if they see that you bought a luxury item like a pizza or something, like if you've gotten something that might bring you some joy in life, because it's like, well, then you're not really suffering enough to need to be on it. You're not really
Yeah.
disabled. Like me as a disabled person who suffers from depressive episodes where it's like on a regular daily basis. I have, I watched a video on it recently where it's passive suicidal ideation, where it's just constantly in my head about how much I want to die. And that's nothing that should alarm anyone right now because there's no intent, there's nothing behind it, but it's something that I have to deal with on a daily basis. I didn't choose this. I didn't want this. Like, there's other lives that I wish I lived, and people feel like we need to be suffering before we can get these things, and I can tell you I'm suffering. Like, I might be able to look happy at times, and there are moments when I am happy. But that doesn't mean overall I'm able to function in society the way that they expect me to. And it just gets so frustrating that they then take it, like regular working people take out their anger of the system on us, saying we don't deserve these extra things because they are working and they're not getting it, instead of realizing they're working and they're not getting it.
Right.
They aren't going after the real issue, which is wages are too low, the cost of living is too high, housing is out of control, grocery prices are unreasonable. Like, all those things are the things that they should be after, as opposed to just getting mad at somebody like me because, you know what? Because I've had that rental contract going back for so long, I have a fairly decent apartment. I like my apartment. It's a nice apartment. But then it's almost like they would say somebody like me doesn't deserve it because I'm not working the same way they are. And it's just so hard when they're so angry, when they're in so much pain themselves, to try to explain it to them in a way that they'll understand.
There's a lot of people who really believe that the idea of hard work is what determines your deserving of, any sort of modicum of positivity or, basic, rights, that it's like a trade. It's like, no, you can't just be expected to have this. You need to give back in some capacity. And a lot of our society does work that way, where we, have people who have the capacity to work are giving to society, and in return, society offers some protection and some rights and benefits. But they believe that as like that's ingrained within nature, as in that has to be how society is formed, and not that there could be other aspects of society where people aren't actually expected to have to give back or have to go above and beyond their expectations to meet a certain standard just to be able to have any modicum of positivity or joy or need to feel validated and live a life that feels, fulfilled. Uh, if I'm disabled, if I have a hard time working a lot of jobs, especially I find a lot of customer service jobs and minimum wage jobs are almost an overlap in a Venn diagram. It's almost a circle of like how much you need to interact with the public and how much those entry level jobs are that will pay you a very small amount of money, and you have to do all this interaction with the public and people please and make sure that everything runs so smoothly that nothing could ever go wrong. And there's people who it's just that's not what they can give back to society. Everybody has the ability to give back to society, but not everybody has to do that by having a job to then turn around and have basic rights and basic needs. People who can't work should still be able to have all of their needs met, have a life that they can feel fulfilled and happy and enjoy and be grateful to be alive in. And they'll find something that they can do to give back to society, because people who have a life that's fulfilled are going to want to do stuff. Like, they're going to want to create. They're going to want to, do something that they're passionate about. They're going to want to, give back in a way that makes them feel really good about themselves and maybe will have a good effect on the people around them. But it doesn't have to be, oh, I work a job, I pay taxes, and therefore I get some help.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that way. There's enough
Mm-hmm.
money that exists out there that's not being taxed or is being hoarded or is being absolutely
Misused.
used, that if you really need the money to pay for just, people not to work, go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Go get it. You
Yeah.
can go get it. Go get it. Like, stop getting angry at people who
Mm-hmm.
honestly don't need to work. They don't need to work.
Yeah. Like, it's all about what skills are considered valuable within the society, and the society is a very capitalistic society. And so it's almost like, unless you have the skills necessary to fit within this capitalist machine, then you're not worthy to be part of this society. Because, like, people, if you go to my website, let me do this fancy thing here on, there we go, see my website, you will see I have amazing artistic abilities. But in this society, that doesn't, a lot of people don't seem to think that's worth much, that I can bring beautiful art into the world, because that's not feeding the capitalist machine. That's not going towards, what the ruling class wants. They don't care about a picture, but, a lot of people do like art. And there's lots of people with disabilities I know who have certain skills, who can do certain things, but society doesn't view them as being valuable skills. And, like, even as I am, like, I try to volunteer in the community, because even with my reluctance or my inability to be social, I do still want to have people in my life. And it's so frustrating that I see so many people who could give back more if they weren't under this extraordinary stress from month to month about how you're going to pay for stuff. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm under the constant strain of, I don't know what would happen if I get kicked off a disability, if something happens to my rental contract, if any of that happens. And so that's a daily kind of thing looming over me. If that stress were to be removed from my life, I'd be a lot more productive, even when it comes to doing my own videos. Because if I'm having a lot of anxiety and I need to distract myself from, thoughts, intrusive thoughts that will then start popping up in my head, to try to relax enough to be able to focus on doing a video, I can't do that if I'm also worried about losing my apartment all the time. And so I'd be much more productive, even with my YouTube videos, if the Canadian Disability Fund actually goes through. And I think we should probably maybe start getting into what we were going to be talking about, where it's the Canadian
Sure.
Disability Benefit, and another thing that people might be seeing, which is the DERB, Disability Emergency Relief Benefit. So it was finally passed through, Bill C-22 was finally passed through the federal government. And also, before anybody starts saying federal versus provincial, they're both responsible. Okay. Both of them have the ability to help, and both of them have the ability to harm, and right now they've both been harming. So there's different ways that they can help, and neither provincially or federally are they doing a good job. So they have passed this Bill C-22, which is the Canada Disability Benefit, which we might be seeing in, what is it now, 2 years?
I saw January 2025.
Yeah. And just a reminder to people, I was trying to find this clip. I know I've seen it somewhere, where Justin Trudeau at the beginning of the pandemic saying he feels that $2,000 is the bare minimum anybody needs to get by. And I'm just going to pull up something, and since I'm on the system that I'm at, I'm going to have to switch screens for a second here, so just bear with me, people. There, that was almost seamless. Okay, so this here just is a good representation of what the rates are across the country. So this hasn't been updated as of this year because I know the rate has gone up like 3% in Ontario from the 1,169. Try living off of whatever amount you're seeing on screen. And also keep in mind, this is the maximum amount. Not everybody gets the maximum amount either. And so you can you can look at all those, and how are you supposed to survive when in Ontario the average rent for a one bedroom is something like $1,500 now, $1,400, $1,500? How are we supposed to get by on what you're seeing here? And like you look at the Northwest Territories and it says 2,153, and you might think, wow, that actually sounds decent. No, it's not. The cost of living up there is just beyond comprehension, which just makes it, when I see what's happening in Nunavut with the 875, I'm like, how does anyone survive there on that? And part of the frustration about this is that Justin Trudeau was saying the bare minimum anyone needs is $2,000. Other than the Northwest Territory, none of these are even close. Not even close. And again, even $2,000, that's not enough depending on where you live. If you live in Toronto,
and thanks to inflation, it's not even worth anything, even as low as it is now. Inflation has made it astronomically worse, and now even this low amount of money doesn't go as far as it went. Like I don't get $850. When I was on income assistance, I was $600. So, you know, it $600 in 2021 and $600 in 2023. Very different. Yeah. And they don't change it.
They don't
Nova
change
Scotia,
it?
the PC government in Nova Scotia refused to increase income assistance this year or attach it to inflation.
Yeah.
They didn't do it this year. And it makes no sense, but unless you want to hurt the poor.
Yeah, because in Ontario, the part of it that's set aside for housing, which they call an allowance, the housing allowance, because yeah, might as well sound all paternalistic like that, is only about $400. And that hasn't changed. Like, it doesn't go up to like maybe the average cost of rent or anything of that sort. It doesn't go up for that. And so depending on how much you get, it forces you to live in different areas. So, you know, if you live in a city like Toronto and that's been your home all your life, then you're forced to have to move out of your home. Like, you're forced out of different communities into different areas. And the thing that is just so frustrating is when Justin Trudeau said that, it was like he was spitting in the eye of everyone who's on disability, because none of us qualified for CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, at the beginning of the pandemic. And many people who were on disability who got the messaging over and over that CERB is for everyone. Everyone can apply. And that was true. You could apply on the phone and get it right away. And then afterwards, if they found that you didn't qualify for it because it was means tested, then they demand that you pay it back. And if you're on government assistance for disability, when they deduct dollar for dollar. And so some people would take it for 1 month, not understanding that they didn't qualify, and then suddenly they weren't getting any payments for 2 months after that. Because when you have a job, often they'll deduct a certain amount depending on how much you make and all that sort of stuff. But when it's another government source, it's dollar for dollar that they deduct. And the other frustrating thing here is that the MPPs in Ontario, their housing allowance is $2,300. That's just their housing allowance on top of their salaries that they get in Ontario. And meanwhile, that's like double what people on disability get for everything. And not everything is necessarily covered. Like, a lot of my medication, most of my medication is covered by disability. Some devices will be covered, some treatments will be covered. But then it gets into another part of the problem where people don't talk about is the Canadian pension plan, where as soon as you get transferred onto that, yeah, sure, it gives you a bit more, but all benefits are cut off. So you don't get any help with drugs or dental or anything that you used to maybe get while you were on disability. So suddenly, at an age where you would actually need those more, they're now cutting out any benefit you have. So I'm just going to quickly switch back to our main screen. Just a sec, folks. If you would like to not have to put up with the screen tile every time I switch a screen, please donate to my channel, become a patron, so that I can forward it an actual Streamlabs subscription. Yeah, it's just to see the luxuries that people in the government get for their cost of living, for like when they get their job, the amount of money that they're allowed to get to move and all this sort of stuff, all the bonuses, and oh well, now they're part of a ministry, so they get even more money and all this sort of stuff. And then you hear about, like in Ontario, Doug Ford misplacing $4.4 billion in COVID funding. Like, all this money that just goes missing, that goes misspent, that goes towards, we needed an analysis on this wetland that we still plan on plowing over no matter what. And so we're going to pay like $100 million just for that to this person. All of this money that goes to people already in positions of power instead of where it could be going to just get us up to the poverty line, it's just so disgusting.
It is. It really is disheartening, and just makes you feel like you're not a priority. It makes you feel like you're not valued. And I think that's why, why you see a lot of people pushing for DERB, why you see a lot of people really pushing the federal government, and kudos to the one or two members of the NDP that actually say something. I still don't like the fact that Jagmeet Singh barely talks about it. He really could afford to talk about it more, because there's no reason why some of those vulnerable people should not have be at the forefront of a party that claims to try to represent the most vulnerable.
Just to explain again, DERB is the Disability Emergency Benefit, because it might take years in order for the Canadian disability benefit to go through. So this would just basically be a top-up to, in some instances, keep people alive long enough to see that, or to keep people housed long enough to see that. And part of the frustration that us in the disability community are having is that when it came to CERB at the beginning of the pandemic, that was passed in under a month. And yet there's one account on Twitter, 280 something. I'll link them in the description box after the stream. But they're on Twitter, and they have like a daily count of how long it's been since Bill C-22 was first presented to the House, and how long it's been and it's going to be until we actually see that. And I'm still skeptical that a lot of people who think they're going to qualify for it will qualify for it, because they're going to look for ways for people to not qualify for it.
They are going to use the disability tax credit to determine whether or not you qualify. So the disability tax credit is if the federal government, when you're filling out your taxes, if you want to apply for the disability tax credit, you must present to the federal government your disability, how long it has affected you, what the determinative outcome of how long this will affect you. A lot of hoops to go through just to say, yes, I have a disability. Yes, it is permanent. Yes, it will continue to impact me going into the future. If you can get through all those hoops, then you get the disability tax credit, which, by the way, if you don't make a lot of money, you can't use anyway, because you don't make enough money to be able to get a refund enough to have the tax credit be worth anything. So it doesn't help the most vulnerable people anyway. And so then they're going to use that specific description to say, if you receive the disability tax credit, then you can be enrolled in the Canada Disability Benefit, which, by the way, the disability tax credit, it expires. So mine, I'm autistic, it's never going to go away. My disability tax credit expires in 2025. I'm going to have to reapply and go through all those hoops again in 2025 in order to get the disability tax credit. And I don't know how long they'll keep it for. I don't know how long it's going to take for that to go through. But that just goes to show that like the barriers of getting help
Mhm.
are these artificial, means tested, procedural barriers that are put up. They just do so much harm, so much unnecessary work, and it's just so they can pat themselves on the back and say we did something.
Yeah. It's because, again, over the pandemic, when people were struggling the most, when everything was shut down, Justin Trudeau was out there celebrating the fact that they were giving $600 to people with disabilities. That only went out to a handful of people who already were getting the disability tax benefits. So the vast majority of people with disabilities did not qualify for that. And so any benefits would then be reliant on the province. And so that was different from province to province. In Ontario, for a maximum of 3 months, you could get an extra $100 if your worker actually told you about it and you bothered to ask. And that was it. Even though during the pandemic and even now, people with disabilities, our expenses also went up because I think part of the argument was, well, they're already living on this low amount, so they don't need it. They're already managing. Whereas a lot of people with disabilities suddenly they can't go in public because they're immunocompromised. You know, they need more delivery services, they need better equipment, masks, things of that sort. Our costs went up too. You know, and it's not like anything is slowing down rent increases and things of that sort. And it's just, we shouldn't have to be begging to just have the absolute bare minimum needed to not be an existential crisis every day.
Right. And then it ties into the second thing that you really want to talk about, which is MAID. And for those who aren't aware, that's medical assistance in dying. And my position on that has always been, because ever since I was young, I've always taken the position of pro euthanasia. My position has always been that if there's a step necessary for somebody to need to end their life, um, and do it painlessly and in a way that is with dignity, I've always been for that. I've not been for it to be the first or second step. I expected it to be step 11 after maybe 10 other steps that were taken to maybe make the situation better or rectify anything that's causing, deliberations. If somebody is in poverty and is disabled, I'm pretty sure fixing the poverty has a big lasting impact on them being able to handle their disability. The fact that medical assistance in dying was one of the first things was pushed incredibly quickly and pushed despite many people in the disabled community saying, hey, wait a minute, why is this the priority? Why isn't helping us with our expenses? Why isn't helping us finding home, finding food, finding resources, getting better attention on our issues? Why was this not given the same urgency as passing a bill that says, if you want to die, sure, we'll help you. So that's why you see so many disabled Canadians and people resisting it. It's not, and like for me, like I said, I'm pro euthanasia, but that was supposed to be step 11, 12, 13 on an already like 10-step plan that has like tried multiple times. Like that's like, it's supposed to be, the last resort, not the first thing that you push.
Yeah.
And then you highlighted before, part of it probably is that it doesn't cost that much in comparison to having to extend the life or extend the quality of life of somebody with a disability. It's easier to be able to say, well, if they choose to die, that's one less person that we have to take care of.
Yeah. On my channel, I have a bunch of videos on this subject because there is a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication going on about what MAID is. So the vast, vast, vast majority of people who apply for MAID are people who are near the end of their life. So they are people who are suffering from cancer and or other terminal illnesses that's going to cause a lot of pain or something of that sort. So when you see like it's 3% of Canadians who died by medical assistance and dying or something of that sort. That number is not as scary as, as what people want you to think it is. Because again, out of the thousands who do it, it's only hundreds who do it because of a disability. And I don't want to say only, because again, some of the people with disabilities are doing it because even with advantages that they have in their life, that they have the accommodations they need, they still don't want to live the life that they have. Which again, I think it's their decision. It's a very personal decision. But there are a number of those people who turn to MAID because they can't get the accommodations that they need. Simple things like in-home care or certain devices or certain treatments. They can't get those, or they're going to end up on the street because of their housing situation. And they also have disabilities. Because right now, they pushed it off that you can't apply for MAID if your sole underlying condition is mental health. But you can apply for MAID if your sole underlying condition is like physical types of disabilities. And again, it's a very personal decision. And when it comes down to it, even for mental health issues, there are certain mental health issues that, again, I'm not necessarily against people applying for MAID if they've tried everything else, if it's a chronic condition, because there are so many different types of mental health issues out there, and some of them cause extraordinarily bad suffering that will never be treated. And if they want to do this, again, that's their own personal decision. But it is when I can't get diagnosed with autism, ADHD, OCD. I can't get the medication for ADHD because of that I would need. I can't relax knowing that I'm in secure housing. I don't have any of that. And yet next year, I'll be able to apply for MAID, potentially. And it's just, how does talk about suicide even happen at that point? If you go to a hospital and you tell them, well, I feel suicidal, you call into the suicidal hotline. And it's like, well, there's nothing that can be done because basically all the available resources to you have been exhausted. So the next step is MAID, as opposed to, having the resources that you actually need be available to you. It is. But there is a lot of misinformation about it. There's a lot of scary stories about people. It is because it's such an emotionally charged subject. Because I do believe that there's people, it's like, oh, well, my uncle applied for it and he never, and nobody ever told us and we were so against him doing it. There's a good chance that was his choice to not tell them because he knew that they wouldn't agree with them. It's so hard to say. But there are, in my videos about MAID, you do see there's cases where if they had gotten the accommodations that they needed, they would have never applied for it. And this is for people who have already used it. They're people who have already passed away because something as simple as having housing with, there was a woman, she couldn't handle cleaners or she needed certain filtration in her housing unit, and she couldn't get a housing unit that was like that, free of cigarette smoke, free of smoke in general, free of chemical cleaners. Because she couldn't get that, she applied for MAID and it was done. So these are lives that we'll never get back. And what does that say about a country where they make it easier for you to die than to live? Like, this is such a barbaric country when we think about it in terms like that, and yet people all around the world like to point to our healthcare system as being good, and it's like, it's not. It might be better for some people in some areas and stuff, but it's not good. And I don't even want to compare it to other countries because, yes, in other countries they might not even have a lot of what we have, but it doesn't mean then it's okay that we have people applying for MAID because there's nothing else available for them.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't help that a lot of our Canadian voters vote in governments that are responsible for their healthcare provincially. And if you look in our country, I believe, except the NDP and the PQ in Quebec. No, not the PQ, sorry. Whoever's in charge in Quebec right now. It's all conservative. It's all conservative premiers who slash funding to healthcare over the years, and then post these surpluses, and then tell their voters that it's the federal government's fault that why healthcare is in shambles. It's really hard to see these governments not put the resources towards funding healthcare properly, whining to the feds about what responsibilities the feds have versus what they have, and going out of their way to not give what's needed to be given, because they think the status quo of disabled people living in poverty or not getting access to their resources that they need, it's status quo, and to them status quo is perfectly fine, no matter how much harm it's causing, because the people who deserve to be harmed for them are being harmed. And it's people who were born disadvantaged in life in their capacity. They see it as it's a dog eat dog world, and it's horrible that we have people in charge who view their own voters and constituents that way.
And
it's
yeah. And I think part of the problem that we, like, the reason why we have so many people like that in government is because there's virtually no representation. Like, there's a few people I know of with, like, visible disabilities that are in office, but I don't know anyone who's, like, publicly autistic or neurodivergent who's in office. And there are so many barriers for people with disabilities to even get into office in the first place. And when people with disabilities get into office, they become very powerful advocates. Like recently in Hamilton, for provincial, we got Sarah Jama, and she is amazing. And she, she uses a wheelchair to get around. She has disabilities, but she is such a powerful speaker. And part of the reason why it's so hard to get into politics and activism is you need money to begin with, to run, to be able to take the time off of work, or to be able to get around, or the extra expenses, wearing a decent outfit. Then there's the stigma attached to having, autism or mental health issues while trying to get into office, because, oh, how can you ever handle it? And it's like, well, the same way we handle everything else, because, like for me, when I was trying to run for office, that was a different type of stress. And that stress actually made me stronger and energized me when it came for advocating for people, to putting myself out there like that. And so that type of stress fired me up versus the existential stress of not knowing, with things that are basically out of my control and I feel like there's nothing I can do about it. And it's so hard for us to get heard any other way because, we have unions that can go on strike. There's talk of a general strike. There's, there is the anti LGBTQ plus march and all that sort of stuff. We can't do that. People on disability can't go on strike to bring attention to our issues because we're already pretty much invisible to society, removed from society. There's nothing we can shut down. So it's really relying on other people to go out there on our behalf, because some people physically, mentally cannot go out to protest, to a rally. Maybe it's because they can't get the transportation. Maybe it's because the crowds are overwhelming. Who knows? And so just trying to get that representation in office is so difficult. And then even the stigma attached to that, because I want to go to a clip of John Fetterman in the States, who, while he was running for office, had a stroke and then ended up with a disability, and just his realization of what that's like and understanding his privilege that he had versus to what is now, and even now the privilege that he has, that he can afford tools to help him in the office. So I'm just going to switch over for that. Just a second, folks. There, I'm almost getting seamless at this. Oh, only I'm not. Just a second. There. Nope, not that. Okay, I think we got it now. You know, a subscription to StreamYards would really help me out right about now. Okay. So I think this is working, so I'm going to just, let's see if this works. Oh, right, I have to click on here, not that one. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's an honor to have you as my mentor. And to welcome, thank you, all of you here, and thank you for coming. And for me, it's been a very personal issue with me. And I'm going to show this, and then I'm going to describe this to others. This is my iPhone, and this is a transcription service that allows me to fully participate in this meeting and conversations with my children and interacting with my staff. You know, I had a stroke about 18 months ago, and I have lost my ability to fully process language. And I like to think I was an empathetic person, truly. But until that happened, I've raised to a whole different kind of level as well. And it's profound to know, though, that I never really considered that without this kind of technology, I couldn't watch television. And I can't imagine if I didn't have this kind of a bridge to allow me to communicate with other people effectively. And, because I live in a political environment, I was ridiculed and made fun of because I wasn't able to process things sometimes or say things. So I'm so sorry that I'm sure many of you had to go through this kind of thing. I was lucky that I was lucky to go through my life, the vast majority of that, without this kind of disability that I have. But again, I can't imagine and how the challenges, and I admire everyone that has to kind of live with these kind of struggles and prevail over them. And the questions that I have is really more of an open-ended kind of question to everyone on the panel. How can we become more empathetic, more responsive, and more effective senators to provide the kind of support and services that anyone in these communities deserve to be a citizen here in our nation? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, to me it speaks volume that you have somebody, who looks big and strong like John, just now starting to understand a lot of the struggles. And had he started his campaign already needing the transcriber that he has to get started, I think he would have been worse off. I don't know if he would have gotten in office had he had these disabilities earlier on in his campaign, because there's just so much stigma attached to them. Because it's just they always look at us like, how do you expect to do your job if you need some sort of assisted device in order to communicate or in order to do that? Or for someone like me where, yeah, I can have a meltdown. So then how can I do my job? And it's well, I'll deal with it when it happens. Any person in politics could get a heart attack, a stroke at any time. you don't look into people's medical records like, well, you've had cancer before, you might get it again, so we're not going to have you in politics. Like, but when it comes to disabilities, there's just so many stigmas around it, and it's like, we'll deal with it. Like, I just, or the thought that you're not allowed to deal with it, that you have to pretend to be normal and everything. It just, like, at least John is now somebody who can really stand up for people. And like, I hate that it happened to him. I don't want anyone to get a disability. And then that's a lot of my frustration with like the whole COVID and the vaccine, anti-vaxxers and stuff, is the amount of people who are, for the first time, understanding what it's like to live with a disability because they ended up with long COVID. And that's why I'm so cautious about getting COVID, is because I already have a disability. I don't want another one. And a lot of people thinking, oh yeah, we can deal with this, it doesn't matter, but they don't know how debilitating different disabilities can be, or how difficult they can be on a person. But I also wanted to...
No, yeah, I agree. A lot of times people really underestimate just what other people are going through, and without the empathy needed, or without using empathy, they don't develop the ability to properly assess what somebody's needs are and whether or not somebody is receiving their needs. And it's again why I said that if you're somebody who feels like you're autistic, or you're ADHD, or you're OCD, or you're any sort of other have other mental health issues, and you're having a hard time finding somebody to diagnose you, especially with our access being so poor, self-identification is valid, especially when we live in an age where we can access so much information and do our own research. Nobody knows how you feel better than you. Nobody knows how I feel better than me. Which is why, until we have a time where our mental health is so well received and so well supported that there aren't barriers to receiving diagnoses. I do believe that self-diagnosis is a valid form of trying to advocate for yourself. And some people don't like labels. Personally, for me, I find labels help me because it helps categorize things. It helps me be able to view things through a different lens. And it helps me, have structure. And I love structure. So I personally do enjoy when I am given a label. I was only diagnosed with ADHD 2 weeks ago. And ever since, I've felt like it's helped validate my experiences a lot more, to have a structure and something to compare my experience with something that's been observed. But it took forever for me to get it. It's not like I just developed ADHD. I've always had ADHD, but I wasn't diagnosed until recently. Yeah. So they missed it. Yeah. They missed it.
And I think there's actually, like, I wouldn't say a darker reason why we're dismissed, but I guess from a capitalist neoliberal point of view, a more practical reason as to why we're dismissed. Because a lot of people who are neurodivergent don't conform. And when you run for a party, they want people who will conform to the party, to their rules, to what they want. Whereas people who don't conform, who might want to speak out more, or who might want to do things differently, that would challenge power, and they don't want that. So they don't want people who think differently in office. And then if you have somebody with a disability who's in office and you show that you can accommodate them, then why aren't we doing that for everyone else? And so they don't want that representation in office. They don't want people to know that, oh, this person can hold down a job if we just accommodate them a bit more, because they just want us gone.
Yep. And a lot of it, honestly, after being around enough fundraisers, it's popularity, high
Mm-hmm.
school, click stuff. Some people have never ever graduated from that kind of social behavior
Mm-hmm.
where it's about who's cool, who's not cool. If the cool person said something, then it's okay. If the not cool person said something, well, then it's not, what they said wasn't valid.
Yeah.
Um, I get that politics is a lot of times a popularity contest, but it's also like a, a like high school, popular kids feeling like they control everything, and if anybody who even looks or acts differently to them uh, gets in, it ruins their fun and it ruins their secret little feelings of being superior. Um, it's unfortunate, but some people just have not graduated from that
Mm-hmm.
mindset. And when they hold power and they hold political power and political influence and are rubbing shoulders with people of status and of who have money, um, it's all a popularity contest, and they use these social cues and these, inside jokes and sarcasm and doing things that only the in group would understand, and makes people who aren't in the in group feel like they can't belong. Um, it's not a welcoming place,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's deliberate.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to switch back over to this because, again, it's all tied. Because a lot of how people who live with disabilities are treated in society has to do with the way government influences society and influences policy and everything of that sort. To the point where there was this poll that went out earlier this year that said 1/3 of Canadians fine with prescribing assisted suicide for homelessness. And like, I just, with a certain amount of people who are fine if their only affliction was poverty. And I just, but when you read into the questions, it's kind of like the actual poll questions. It is kind of like, if there's no way to get out of poverty, then it should be okay for people to apply for May type thing. And it all depends on how a lot of these are worded, as well as to what kind of results you would get, because there's also this one: MAID should be available for those who can't find affordable housing. And here there's actually only 10% agree with that. So it all depends on how you're asking questions, all that sort of stuff. But let me just switch back a second, folks. Yeah, but the reality is there's a large chunk of society who's basically saying it's okay if we are just erased from society. Like, it's okay if we just no longer exist within society. And like, how does somebody who doesn't really have a voice go up against that? Because, I tried to get into politics, and the main reason why wanted to get into politics was so that I could get that platform to be heard, to have that voice out there. And I was running for the NDP, and even when I was running, I fully knew that, yes, I might get into office. Whether or not I spent the full 4 years there was another point, because, again, I don't conform, and I would have called them out on stuff. Like, if there was something that I seriously didn't agree with, because I wasn't there to make money, I would be there to make change. So, yeah. I don't know. It's a struggle, but I think
I
with
will
more.
I will say that um, what gives me hope, because I feel like ending on a positive is important. Number one, the before Twitter went the way of the before the Muskification of Twitter, um, it was actually a place where you could like find a lot of people of common ground,
Mm-hmm.
be able to like share stories, share perspectives, and just show that like we're not alone in this. You talk to somebody who grew up like I'm from rural Nova Scotia, but like 50 years ago, I wouldn't be talking with anybody outside my little town about anything. you go to the library, maybe look up some stuff if you're interested, maybe go, once or twice a year into the big city of Halifax and maybe see some stuff. But like the amount of like being able to connect and share and be able to have solidarity with so many different people on social media, it's unprecedented. It's really unprecedented. And I know there's a lot of negatives about social media, but the unprecedented amount of being able to see people from all over the world and find common ground very quickly and very easily allows for stories like this, stories like ours, to be shared and heard, and to receive validation. And I also think that, organizing is a lot easier now when you can text somebody where you need to go. Back in the day when they had to organize, it was all pamphlets and sending out letters, and you hoped that everything went out at the proper time, and things had to be done so like almost like clockwork to get proper organizing done. And now if things change, you can just update your event. You can send a text to somebody. We live in a time now where if we want to organize and we want to share and we want to make change, it's never been easier. Mm-hmm. And that's why I do feel like there's a lot of hope in the future of things making change, because we are louder now than we've ever been. Yeah. And we are more united across the world than we've ever been, even if it's hard.
Yeah, the more people speak up, the more others find familiarity. It wasn't until I got into Twitter and started being exposed to different people that I started to understand myself fully, with being neurodivergent, with being non-binary, and all these things that were always part of my life that I never quite had the words for. And then, it encourages other people to speak up. Like, once you have a better understanding of yourself, you can then start speaking up, which then encourages other people, or other people can relate, and it just starts a chain reaction. Because it was just a few people on Twitter that got me to realize what is going on in my life. And then I was able to incorporate that into my YouTube channel. When I was with TYT doing Rebel HQ videos, I would talk about disability on there. And, there was one comment that really I just remember a lot when I was talking about disabilities in particular. And the person saying, this is the first time she's seen online, other than niche channels, somebody addressing disabilities. And it was the first time she felt heard. And just having that, knowing that as long as we can get onto YouTube, as long as we can get onto platforms, social media platforms, where we can share the message and encourage other people to speak out and to help others find their voice, yeah, change is possible. It is. And for a lot of the disabilities out there, the technology is there to help people, fully participate in society. It's educating people to have a better understanding that the way people participate in society may not look the way that they think it should look, but is just as valid. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Change is always possible. So, I just want to pay attention to chat and maybe go over some questions that are in chat. But before we do that, do you want to plug any of your stuff, Mark?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, Marc Joycey. I'm on X. Yeah.
I still call it Twitter.
I don't know. I don't even know what to call it. It's just.
If you notice, I've updated my graphics.
App, formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, I've updated my graphics for Twitter, so you'll still see the little bird, but you'll see the X over the head.
There you go.
It's killed it.
I'm on Blue Sky. And I am an actor. When you go on my Instagram, you see that I got an agent, and my link is my links are in there. I'm just starting out. I don't expect to be, opposite Leonardo DiCaprio anytime soon, but who knows what could end up happening. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming up. So.
Great.
Yeah, that's where you can find me. Thanks you for having me.
Yeah.
This was
Thank you for
a really nice conversation.
Yeah. I have links to all of your stuff in the description box below.
Awesome, amazing. Everybody, subscribe to Sandee, like her stuff, and check out her Patreon. Donate, and become a member because she's got awesome content, and it's really awesome to support other Canadians who are doing political stuff. We may be a small country, but we got a lot of cool people up here.
Yeah. Okay, so you're free to go if you would like, and I'll just maybe go over some of the comments that are in chat, but if you want to stick around for that, you're more than free to do that as well.
I'll stick around for some comments before I go.
So many out of context when you just read, "Don't be foolish." It's like, what? But it's not about me. So it doesn't look like there were any super chats, which is fine. I'm still blown away that I get those. Let's see. Thank you, Environmental Coffee House, for saying that you have respect for me for running for office. Yeah, it was, I have one video about my second attempt. I still haven't gone into detail about what happened in the first attempt, which was just broke me in a way that is hard to explain, but also kind of led me down the path of starting my YouTube channel, that which was also inspired by Michael Brooks. It's quite the story. So Chris B. Grams, thank you for showing up, and says, and we don't seem to have much issue with greed. Yes, there's not too many people complaining about the greed in politics, really. Like when it comes to no, it's the people living with disabilities who are the ones that are greedy, who want more than they deserve. And meanwhile, politicians and the ruling class and the 1%ers who hoard all this money and wealth and stuff, no, they're not the greedy ones that we should be attacking. Let's see. Hey, somebody said true, Mark, 100%. I don't know at what.
Oh,
but
amazing.
Somebody has agreed
with you. It must have been something I said.
Yeah, somebody has agreed with you at some point during the video. I still shower. Very cool. Being able to speak on cam is so difficult. Some of us were discussing monetizing your channel and the ethics of it. You're doing important work. It's great work. Thank you. Yeah. I'm only monetizing my channel to a point. As long as I can not have unskippable ads on my channel, I'll do that. At some point, YouTube is changing it so that we have no say in it, and there's going to be ads that you can't skip. I'm also not planning on adding tier subscriptions to my YouTube channel, because I'd much rather people just subscribe to my Patreon, because Patreon takes much less of a cut, and I also despise ads and advertising in a way that is just visceral within me. I despise it so much, and so I hate putting it on other people. And then somebody said most of it, Mark. Very recently, so I think they agree with most of what you were saying. Controvert Mama, I appreciate you so much, Sandee. Thank you for all you do. Well, thank you for coming out and watching. I appreciate all the people who have supported me to get me this far, because I really would not have made it this far if it wasn't for everyone. I think everyone might have seen Frodo popped into frame for a few moments, so you can see he is doing quite well after his medical issues. Again,
everybody donate.
Yeah.
Everybody donate for Frodo.
Yeah, I'm very close to paying off his vet bill, just over $300 shy of that. So you can do that by the PayPal link, or if you're Canadian, e-transfer.
You know what needs to be covered under our public health care is animals.
Veterinarian care. Yeah.
I'm not even joking.
I'm not either. They need.
If an animal shows that much love in a family,
mm-hmm.
There's no reason why we can't afford to do that.
Yeah, definitely veterinary care should be included in just basic healthcare stuff. As well, there's one that's never really talked about all that much, and that is the cost for funerals. Like, depending on the province and stuff, I think you can get certain parts of it covered, but it's it should also be 100% covered, because that is something that, people can't avoid. And people shouldn't have to be going into debt at such a tragic time in their life for
exactly.
funerals, because in my family, the last few funerals were just bare bones, not because of cost necessarily, but because we're not big into the whole ceremony and presentation of it. We just want things super simple as can be. Even that was thousands of dollars. So that should all be included. Okay. Love hearing, so misinformation wars with Val Pardis. Again, I'm going to apologize for not being able to read people's names correctly. Love hearing from other neurodivergent people about politics and society. Well, thank you for coming out. Sounds like you probably also have some sort of content out there, judging by your username. Yep. Igloo agrees with us. For real, pet health care and funerals should absolutely be covered. Yes. MIDI doctors, thank you so much for coming out. Also, thank you for all the times you plug my channel on the Majority Report. I do see it from time to time. I don't necessarily pay attention to chat on that so much because it's so big and busy. I have a hard time following it. So, but I do see you plugging me on there from time to time, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming out for this. Okay, I think...
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're good. I'm still learning how to do this live stream thing in a proper way of like signing off from this.
It's okay. You're my first podcast I've been on, so.
I'm your first. Well, this is also the first time we've talked.
Yeah, funny enough, we talked a lot on Twitter, but it's the first time we've had the convo.
I appreciate a lot of your support too. I know you've also IM'd the Majority Report about me once as well. That actually got me a lot of attention.
I remember doing that, yeah. I remember you hid me in a video.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hid your name somewhere in the background in the video because...
It took me forever to find it.
Yeah. Because I was giving you a shout out for something, but it's still... And I'm still unsure. I guess this is part of my autism. I don't know if people want shout outs or not when I include maybe a tweet or some of their content. I don't shout out my patrons and stuff because I know personally if I'm a patron to somebody, I don't necessarily want the attention about it. I don't want my name broadcast, so I don't tend to do that. So I don't know if people want it or not. So sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. It's streaming video making etiquette that I'm still learning.
You can always make a poll and just figure out who in your audience wants it, or make it a tier list,
Well, I know one of my patrons specifically said that they don't want that. Before they knew if I did that or not, they said that they don't want their name kind of coming up at the end type thing. So I tend to play it safe, but I thank my patrons all the time because they are amazing people. People who have donated to, Frodo's vet bill, people who have gotten things off of my Amazon wish list, which is also linked below. Super incredible, generous people. That's one thing I'll say about people who are within this community that I found of neurodivergence, disabilities, through Twitter and stuff. It's just such an incredible, supportive group of people that I'm so happy to have found.
They really are.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I still shower. I will probably go through this and see if there's anything worth putting into a clip. I still need to do that with my last couple live streams. Anyway, so.
Well, this was good. Let me know if you ever want to have me on again. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thanks, Chad, for being awesome. So.
Okay, I'm just so. Right, I didn't mention this before, but if you want to stick around afterwards so we can have a decompression talk, we can do that.
Yes.
So I'll just switch screens again quickly. And this is where I officially say goodbye to everyone. So, salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandee, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.